The Direct Entry Midwifery meeting is convening at 8:05 a.m. on August 15th, 2024 at the Health Licensing Office in Salem, Oregon by telephone conference call. I will now call roll. Lennon Clark.
Present.
Rebecca Fisher.
Present.
Meredith Klein.
Present.
Christine Morales.
Here.
Lynette Pettibone.
Here.
Misha Ronak.
Here.
Meredith Mance. Here. Members, when you wish to speak, please state your last name for the record. Members are asked to not use the chat feature during meetings. Public members attending in person wishing to speak must first sign in on the roster sheet available. For public members on MS Teams, please email Carrie Edwards at carrie.edwards@oha.oregon.gov and provide your first and last name. Public and interested parties' feedback may be heard during the public interested parties' feedback period if indicated on the agenda. Everyone is asked to use appropriate language, manners, and protocols when conducting board business. This meeting is called to order. All right, so I believe our first order of business is just approving the agenda.
This is Lynette Pettibone, and I motion to approve the agenda.
Do we have a second?
This is Meredith Klein, I second.
Awesome. A motion has been made. I will now call for a vote. Lennon Clark.
Aye.
Rebecca Fisher.
Aye.
Meredith Klein.
Aye.
Christy Morales.
Aye.
Lynette Pettibone.
Aye.
Misha Ronak.
Aye.
Meredith Mance. Aye. The motion passes and the agenda is approved. All right, so I believe we can move on to the next piece. And that is the review and approval of supervision guidelines. I think so for everybody not here last session, I kind of push it back to this one so we would have some LDMs present for the conversation. Looking at the meeting materials, I'm not sure if these got resent out or not. I don't know that I got them again, but I did get them last time. What this is about are those supervision guidelines that are on the bottom of like the two cases that we've been sending back and forth. That's the one place I know where to reference them that says like what includes our guidelines for when we're doing chart reviews for supervisors. And wanted to make sure they were current. The one thing that I wanted to bring up to potentially discuss about removing from it is a urinalysis during labor admission, since that isn't always standard practice in labor. And I don't want to put us in a position where people are not fulfilling the guidelines of their supervision or not doing what, we would like them to do when we're using something that isn't actually necessarily a community standard. So that was the thing I wanted to bring up about those supervision guidelines. Everything else on them I'm comfortable with, but just wanted to bring that to the group. Does everybody know what I'm talking about?
This is Heather Shepard, and I apologize because I don't believe I remember to resend those to you guys with this agenda material.
They are in the agenda material sent from Carrie.
Correct.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So was there a particular reason that statement was added?
That's what we don't know. That was before all of our times of why that was there. I think it's because maybe it was more of a standard of care then, but I mean, that's not even typically a standard practice in L&D units in hospitals. So it feels a bit unfair for us to be held to that when we're being supervised for these types of things. So I'm not sure the intention of why it was there initially, but I think maybe it's just that practice has evolved over time.
Yeah, because it's very unclear whether this is just a regular dip or you're trying to look for, I don't know, UDS or what. So it seems very ambiguous and not really necessary because I've also never seen it in any kind of labor and delivery situation I've managed.
I agree. It just seems a little out of nowhere. Everything else seems reasonable to me. I mean, there was nothing else on this that was a glaring like, we need to fix this. That was the reason I had wanted to bring these up. But again, it's because we're using these standards to make sure members are doing
I have a
their due
question.
diligence. Yeah.
I'm seeing under postpartum, it says, assessment at appropriate intervals, and then it says ID deviations.
Oh, that's a good point. Does
Not,
anybody have any idea what that means?
I mean, my guess is that it means that the baby didn't get switched kind of thing, right? But that probably wouldn't happen in a home setting.
Right.
I figure it's more like identification of deviations of normal. That would be
Mm.
my interpretation of it. I don't know. I guess
It
we have
doesn't
to
say
be more clear.
identification, though. It says ID, which is very odd.
Yeah.
Anyway, that one should probably go too, as long as we're making changes.
Yeah, I think because we have assessment at appropriate intervals, then that should cover deviations, right, from normal since we're assessing. So we can remove that. And I'm looking back for my urine dip. So it's 4.2 and 5.1b are the ones we're looking at. While we have this open, does anybody have any anything else to add or anything we want to include or not include? Also, it looks like Misha's in the waiting room if he can be let in.
This is Travis. One of the reasons that we noticed on this, one of the things we noticed on this was at the top, it just has some outdated language about absolute and non-absolute risks. And we've just changed some of that language in the rules. So that I think is something also that we would want
To match the way the rules are written.
pay attention to and about matching it with the current rule.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that. I don't mind changing that. Do we need to dictate the exact language or are we able to like say change to match? What's the best way to go about doing that from our perspective?
Well, so if we don't, I believe what we could do is just say we could just match that with the new rule terminology. And then maybe when you vote, you could have, you could delegate it to the chair or someone to look at that final language and say it's okay. Or we could just bring the final document back to the next, with it completed. These are all the changes you wanted. Does this look good? And everybody can have a chance to vote on it. We can just vote on it at the next meeting.
Okay. Does anybody have a strong preference either way? I don't mind if it's delegated for me to just check the language since none of these are like major big practice changes. It's just removing two things and adjusting language to match the rules. But I also understand if everyone would like to see it and vote on it next time. But if we'd like to just have a vote on it, we can delegate and be done, and then I can approve it once it's written.
This is Meredith Klein. I'm a fan of you approving it after those changes are made. I also wanted to mention one other thing though.
Mhm.
In the beginning part, those first two paragraphs, the end of it, it says the supervisor will address any areas of concern, submit a report to the board for each supervised birth. So I guess I'm wondering how this happens, and I don't think I've ever seen a report back on what's happening, and we have had several people in the years that I've been on here that have had like prescribed supervised, so I just don't know, or chart review with a supervisor, and who looks at that, and what's the sort of tracking system for that, and should we put it in here, or is this adequate for this document? I guess it's both a question, how's this being actually followed up, and then also do we need to change anything in here? Because how do we know that this has happened? Does
This is
answer?
in recent memory regarding the final orders and settlement agreements and things of that nature that have gone out that have kind of used these guidelines. It's typically stated how they're supposed to report or if they're supposed to report, like they need to be, like the supervisor, I like to remember one in particular recently where it said the supervisor was just to provide a document saying that they completed their supervision. They didn't need to send in like and they did this and they did that, or they just said that they can, completed their supervision with them. I think that's probably more common. I'm just trying to think back. I don't think I've ever had a situation, like you're saying, I don't think we've ever had a situation where the board has specified that in the notice. So usually the report back has been specified in the notice. But, and we could reflect that here, or we could, set a standard and then. So it's up to you how you want to handle that, but.
Sammy has her hand.
Oh, yeah, Sammy.
Yeah, you could put like if applicable or if determined by the board or something like that to like a catch-all statement.
Mm-hmm.
And you could say something like, if you wanted to, the supervisor will address all areas of concern with the supervisee and report to the board as detail or as required or something like that.
Yeah, I would just love this loop to be closed where the board actually sees it. Because if we're requiring supervision, we have a high level of concern, and then it's not like it. I mean, I'm fine for it to be the the board chair handles that or the investigator sees it. I mean, I just haven't like seen the completion of that.
Yeah, and I think that it's concerning that we were supposed to be putting some language around it in the final notice, because I don't think we knew that, because I think it said it here, and so we thought it was actually happening because of that. So yeah, I definitely am with Meredith that we need to find a way to make sure this is actually being followed.
This is Misha. Is this the only circumstance where someone is supervised when we give a notice for that, or is there some sort of probationary period at the start of a license or other times? No, it's just as a disciplinary sort of scenario typically. Okay.
Well, it does seem like if you've gone through the process enough to get to the point of requiring someone to be supervised, that whoever is supervising them should have some way that they have to document back to the board, not just a yes or no, but possibly a little bit more than that, so you know if the supervision was adequate.
Yes, because we put like there's a time frame, there's a number of births, there's I think the proscription has been clear maybe on the front end, and maybe what it says here in this document is adequate. I'm just on the back end, I haven't seen this be.
I'm wondering if maybe the language is adequate, but I think maybe what I'm hearing is what we'd like to follow the language and make sure that we are getting reports back from the supervisor to do those final checkoffs for people.
Yeah, for sure.
Because the person who's being disciplined is basically also tasked with finding who's supervising them, correct?
Correct. And then it's board approved. So once they find them, they have to submit that name to us so that we can approve and make sure it's an appropriate person.
Okay.
Yeah, so at least there is like that little bit of a check in place, but it's now the back end that we want to make sure that once it's done, it's been appropriately done.
This is Lennon Clark. I just wanted to say that I'm currently supervising somebody, and it would be really nice if there was like a more clear directions of what I'm supposed to be turning in. Like, I don't know if we even need to create like an actual checklist kind of document, like kind of how we have to do when we renew our license, or if it should just be like a little, in the directions to the person being supervised, something like the supervisor will turn in a summary of the dates you met, or how many cases, like a little summary type thing. It would be nice if that was really clear, because it sounds like it's just kind of like, well, just let us know it happened. And I don't know how much details to include or not. So it would be nice, I think, to have it be more clear.
Because if you had additional issues with this particular midwife and you have nothing back from the supervisor, it seems like you'd be open to legally for not following up on that part adequately.
That makes sense to me. And I know in a lot of the notices that we've issued that have supervision requirements, I think we've used language in the past that we ask them to follow the OMC chart review guidelines, like the form that OMC has made. So I do think like a form exists. I think we just need to be collecting it.
Yeah, and like I said before, I think in the past, the board has tended to take the circumstances of each supervision into account and say, this is what we want for this supervision. I know that we've had different reporting requirements for each one. I think it just is a matter of, do you want to have one standard that is always for supervision for everybody reports this way, or do you want to have the board determine on an individual basis? So the language here, I guess you could always go the other way. You could say they have to report, and then you could specify if you didn't want them to report every birth. That's you can always craft your notices or what your supervision requirements as needed and edit this as needed. But this is kind of the standard. So go either way.
I'm leaning towards leaving the language in so that we have it as kind of a catch-all and then paying more attention when we are issuing notices of intent to making sure that we've got a process in place for these things rather than removing it and risk losing it entirely.
Yeah, and usually you can set a time frame when you're determining how many births, how much time, and then when you expect to have that report, turned in by.
Should we add something along the lines of report must be reviewed and approved by the board?
Well, I think that, that's something that I'm not sure.
I mean, collective Meredith Klein's probably the longest standing member of this board. And she's never seen anything come back. And so I think we have, as a board, we have quite a bit of concern that HLO is not following up on this. And we have no way to assess other than you saying, well, I know there's been some cases where, so we can't talk specifics cases in this setting. But it would be good to know like exactly how HLO has been following up and maybe look back at some of the more recent incidences of requiring supervision and what has actually happened in that setting. Otherwise, I'm inclined to add something requiring board sign off in order for the supervision requirement to be lifted.
Well, actually, what I'm saying, Lynette, is that you always specified how you want the report to happen in the notice. And we've always followed that, is what I'm saying. It's not like, oh, hey.
Like you can't truly close the case until you have the report that your requests have been completely met. Right?
Yeah, and yeah, as they are usually laid out in the notice. So that's what I'm saying. Normally the notice has specificity about supervision and how to report, how that needs to be reported, either to the board or to the office. Pretty much everything is always reported to the board in the notices, in my experience. But whether or not it's approved by the board or just reported to, those are very different things. And I think that's why Heather popped on.
Yes, I agree that those are two very different things. In terms of the language, perhaps it could be that you have what's in there and then you add unless otherwise indicated in a final order. That way, just as Meredith was saying, that if it's in the final order, you follow the final order. If it's not dictated in the final order, then you follow what's in the midwifery supervision guidelines as far as that report. And as Trampus is saying, those final orders usually have been stating how that loop is closed. And so that the practice of what has been happening would flow right with that language. So you could just change it to say, unless otherwise indicated in a final order. That way you have that opportunity to have something different specified in the final order, which is what we do now.
I would be comfortable with adding just unless otherwise specified, so that the default is that we get the report back to us. And then moving forward, I think we can pay closer attention in our notices to make sure that we've got the loop closing that we're looking for each individual case. How do we feel about that?
Sounds good.
Yeah, I'm good with that. And then I just have questions about how to make the motion.
Yeah, so Heather can guide us there.
Do I have to say everything separately, or can I say as directed by the board?
I think you can say as directed by the board, and then also delegate to Meredith final approval of the language in the midwifery supervision guidelines.
Yeah, got that.
Thanks.
Mhm.
Cool. Then we are ready when you are.
Great. This is Lynette Pettibone, and I motion to change the midwifery supervision guidelines as directed by the board and delegate to the chair the final approval of the final language.
Do we have a second?
It's me, Sharonic, I second.
Okay, motion has been made. I will call for a vote. Lennon Clark,
Aye.
Rebecca Fisher,
Aye.
Meredith Klein,
Aye.
Christy Morales,
Aye.
Lynette Pettibone,
Aye.
Misha Ronick,
Aye.
Meredith Mance, aye. The motion passes. HLO, friends, do you have what you need to make those changes?
Do.
All right. Awesome. Okay, thank you for that, everybody. So that will take us on to public and interested parties feedback. Here, not sure if we have anyone here. At this time, the Board of Direct Entry Midwifery will hear public interested parties feedback. Members of the public, this meeting is being held by MS Teams video conference and is being recorded. The recording will be posted to the internet for public viewing. Please be sure to mute your microphone and unmute only when you have been recognized. Once recognized, please state your name and affiliation to the board for the record. Do we have any members of the public here who wish to speak?
There was no one here physically in the boardroom, and I do not believe there's anybody on the.
There's one person
Oh, there
online,
is,
but
okay.
they're not raising their hand or anything.
Yeah, looks like there's one public member on the Teams meeting virtually, but they're not indicating that they want to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, hearing we have no feedback, then we will go into item 4, which is executive session. Do we have a time estimate on this one, everybody?
This one is legal advice.
Yeah.
Or
Let me get people moved. I'm gonna
do
read
you
it.
have a time frame on this one?
We don't need legal advice today.
So are we removing this from the agenda?
Yes, and then you can go into the executive session under 6.
Okay, do we need to make a motion to remove it from the agenda, or can we just move on?
I think you can move on.
Great. Okay. So that takes us to number 5. We're back. Now, number 6 is executive session again, but to discuss things. So bear with me. All right. Do we have a time estimate on this executive session?
I would say that maybe half hour to 45 minutes.
Okay. We'll go 45 to be safe. All right, the Board of Direct Entry Midwifery will now meet in executive session pursuant to ORS 192.6602F and ORS 676.595 for the purpose of considering information or records that are exempt from by law from public disclosure at 8:29 a.m. on August 15th, 2024. Representatives of the news media shall be allowed to attend executive session. Audience members attending through MS Teams will now be moved into a separate breakout room, and audience members attending in person are asked to leave the room both for the duration of executive session. Please continue to keep your phone muted and cameras off. Are there any representatives of the news media on MS Teams?
No.
Okay. Recognizing there is no news media in attendance, the public will be moved into a separate breakout room for the duration of the executive session. We will return to open session before taking any final action or making any final decisions. It is estimated that the board will return to public session at 9:15 a.m. Please be aware that it is possible that the board's executive session may last longer than 9:15 a.m. If the public has any questions about whether the board is still in executive session, then the public can contact Carrie Edwards at carrie.edwards@oha.oregon.gov.